For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to Strat News Global. You're watching The Gist. I'm Nilanjana Banerjee. There has been considerable speculation about the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or the IPEF, that was inaugurated just a few days ago during the Quad Summit in Tokyo. Now, before I introduce my guest, let's take a quick look at what exactly the IPEF is about. As you will be seeing on your screen now, the framework has all four Quad members, that's Australia, Japan, India, and the US. It also has, as founding members, 7 ASEAN members: Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Besides them, the Republic of Korea and New Zealand are also members, and these countries together make up nearly 40% of the global GDP. Interestingly and importantly, China is not a member and nor was it invited. Russia is also outside this framework. IPEF is not the typical free trading agreement, yet it will adhere to internationally accepted norms of trade while giving its members the freedom to choose from the pillars of economic cooperation, such as clean economy, connected economy, fair economy, and resilient economy. And now, to find out more about IPEF and what it entails for the entire region, I'm joined by Dr. Rahul Mishra. Dr. Mishra is the director of the Center for ASEAN Regionalism, and he's the head of European Studies Program, Asia Europe Institute, University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Mishra, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Right. So let's begin. My first question to you, it appears that the US wants to build a group of like-minded countries as a counterweight to China. Apart from that, would you say that the IPEF is an attempt to bring the US closer to the ASEAN, thereby perhaps mitigating the impact of Donald Trump?
Okay, first and foremost, IPEF, the economic framework, is a part of larger American scheme to ensure that the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region is protected, it is preserved, it is enhanced. And IPEF is just one of the initiatives that the US has taken, the Biden administration has taken. This includes, if you look at the range of institutional mechanisms, there are so many of them. And Biden administration is a little more proactive on the multilateral trade front. But there's a lot of continuity between Trump and Biden administrations. So Make America Great Again and America First strategies are there, very much in place in some or the other ways. So American economy is protectionist by all means. It is likely to remain so, but US re-entering the scene is basically to provide new frameworks so that areas, for instance, in case of IPEF, the 4 pillars, if a country is comfortable working on, let's say, on clean economy, then they can join one pillar. If they are agreeable to all connected, resilient, and fair economy pillars also, for instance, Singapore, then they can join all 4 pillars. So this is actually a coalition of willing in a very liberal, atomistic, individualistic sense. So to that extent, I think it provides a number of opportunities. It provides a maneuvering space, not just for the US, but also for its partners. So I would say that it is not just about China. It is more than that. It's not just the China containment strategy.
Right. But do you think it'll work? Coming from where you are, where you are located, how do you see, what does ASEAN think of the Quad? And what does ASEAN think of the US now?
Okay, first and foremost, ASEAN is not a homogeneous entity. It's a bunch of
Yes.
10 countries, countries that are uh, at loggerheads with the US. So, for instance, countries such as Myanmar are facing sanctions, and those sanctions are very stringent. There
Hmm.
are countries like Philippines, which used to have very good ties, but they are trying to revive their relationship. But then there are countries like Indonesia, which are very enthusiastic about partnership with the US. So all in all, the ASEAN framework, what it provides is a consensus-based mechanism. What is the consensus on the US? The first one, that we as in the ASEAN member countries, must have the US as one of the partners. So despite ASEAN's reluctance and hesitation on Quad, 7 out of 10 countries supported IPEF, right? So on the economic front, on the economic pillar, there is certainly a lot of willingness, a lot of interest in engaging the US. On the Quad, though, the problem is that it is very security centric, it is military centric, and that perhaps makes some of the countries very anxious. So that is why joining Quad is out of question for any of the ASEAN member countries. Quad plus, we can mull over it in next 2 to 5 years, but not before that. Working with Quad is a possibility that's already started. So, for instance, Quad member countries reaching out to ASEAN is more or less acceptable um, in stronger powers. For instance, Vietnam and Indonesia. Those countries which are dependent on China on the economic trade investment front, such as Malaysia or even Philippines, partly Vietnam and Singapore as well, they are the ones who are a little more hesitant on the security strategic front. But they are also benefiting from this wider and multifaceted engagement with the US. So
Right.
engaging the US on the economic front is certainly that they're looking forward to, they have been working on, uh, and they don't mind this bit of soft military engagement as well, but certainly not a very militarized, very securitized Quad plus kind of arrangement. No, they're not going to go for that.
Right. Like you mentioned, 7 out of the 10 ASEAN countries have welcomed the IPF. They have signed up as founding members, and they might be careful about articulating it in public, but ASEAN has concerns about China.
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, because even for ASEAN foreign ministers, and they're going to have a meeting in early August, if you ask them this question, and in private quarters, they would say the same thing. It's a very
Hmm.
hazy situation because China is the biggest source of investment for ASEAN. China is the biggest source of inbound tourist movement for ASEAN countries. China is the biggest trade partner for these countries. So last year, China replaced other major powers on all counts. How do you deal with such a big neighbor is a question. And second, coupled with that is the reliability question. Can the US really replace China? I mean, for
Hmm.
on the trade and investment part, for instance, multilateral trade, we saw that during Trump's time, the U.S. withdrew from CPTPP, from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but that was not his original idea. It started with Obama, and even Hillary Clinton was equally firm on this. So the process or the opinion, the public opinion and the policy makers' opinion on TPP was more or less the same, right? So the question here in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN region, is even if we say yes to the US, are they going to go down to Southeast Asian, the level of small and medium economies, and sign a multilateral trade deal? Are they not going to be bully on this? Or if they are insecure, for instance, uh, on the uh, on the outsourcing sector, Philippines is the biggest player here.
Yes.
Uh, if they get insecure, are they not going to stop the outsourcing sector? So KPO, what will happen to all those sectors that India is the leading power there?
Hmm.
So reliability is a major question. With China, these problems don't exist because there are traditional, centuries-old trade bonds linkages, and those linkages have been essentially capitalized by the People's Republic of China. So state agencies have started playing that role, and that's what makes China really uh, the strongest stakeholder. And these relations are impenetrable unless the US does something extraordinary and takes steps out of the box.
So I'm coming back to what I had asked previously. You have said it is hazy, and there are so many factors yourself. Well, as you said yourself, how is it going to work? How is the IPF actually going to work? What is
Okay,
the
it's gonna
thinking?
work. Okay, so it's gonna work because these countries of Southeast Asian region, of the ASEAN region, barring perhaps Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and these are countries that are not on board on IPEF, these are countries that rely on exports, that rely on trade and investment. These countries are integral part of regional supply chain mechanisms. So they are very open to new ideas, whether it is on connected economy or on resilient and clean economy. Uh, After COP21, COP26, we know that uh, countries across the world have to abide by those climate rules and norms that are coming up. And everybody is interested in reducing the carbon footprint. So if there is something interesting um, on the clean economy part, uh, the third pillar essentially, uh, I think these countries would be open to that. And the fourth one is even more interesting, the fair economy, because it talks about anti-money laundering, it talks about anti-bribery, and also anti-corruption provisions. Terror finance could be another interesting, important area there. Most of these Southeast Asian economies, particularly Thailand and Indonesia, partly Malaysia, Singapore, you can count Singapore as well. These are countries that are massively affected by these problems, right? So for them, the fourth pillar is equally interesting. The second pillar, which talks about connectivity and supply chains, and disruptions in supply chain. We saw how the COVID-19 pandemic and the zero lockdown policy that is going on in China has disrupted regional supply chain mechanisms. Is there an alternative to that? Southeast Asian countries, ASEAN economies, and linked with South Korea and Japan are very much interested in looking at the US as a partner there. Another very interesting point is the discriminatory and unethical practices on artificial intelligence. 5G technology, artificial intelligence, use of swarms, militarization of these technologies, AI technologies, is something that has scared Southeast Asian economies, the policymakers here. And China is one of the leading powers there. So even in case of Malaysia, choosing Ericsson over Huawei was a major decision, and intellectuals and academicians, media was not anticipating this. This happened because of a very careful thinking that maybe we should uh, uh, give Ericsson another chance and look for Western supply sources on 5G technology than the Chinese one. So this region is interested in diversifying. That makes the US and its IPEF plans workable. Uh,
Right.
IPEF itself provides a number of options that makes it workable. At least, the possibilities are immense. The third is America doesn't have to donate money here, right? These pillars are basically about rules. It's essentially a rule book, right?
Hmm.
So in your trade, investment, and even multilateral arrangements, you just have to follow these rules of the game, which are internationally universally accepted. So I think to that extent, IPF should work. The added advantage, and perhaps the biggest one, would be if the US returns to this multilateral trade game through TPPA or any other initiative that is attached with the IPF. That would be the game changer, I would say.
I see. Coming to India, how do you look at the manner in which India has, enthusiastically endorsed the IPEF. It has had a very, very positive reaction to it. How do you look at it?
Well, India is an outlier when it comes to multilateral trade arrangements. We've seen how RCEP, uh, the rules of origin problem or problems with China aside, even Indian domestic industry is not prepared for it. And the leading sectors like iron and steel, which are supposed to be the big powers in the Indian corporate sector, were not interested in it, right? So there are problems in the Indian economic architecture. Um, that aside, India's economic considerations are always uh, driven by security considerations. So India out of RCEP was partly um, uh, a decision taken to counter China. So IPF, which doesn't have the China in it and has the US in it, is certainly good news. Other than that, if you go down to the details, I think there are going to be a lot of complications there. India has to open up and be more transparent in terms of its policies, whether it is on the fourth pillar, the fair economy or clean economy, or even the connected one. So there's really a lot of homework that Indian industry captains have to do, and Indian government also has to lead it from front.
Right.
Other than that, another problem is, and that makes IPEF or any other new arrangement absolutely essential for India, is that India is not a part of any of these arrangements. RCEP just one. APEC, which started in 1989, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, India is not a part of that. Imagine Russia is a part of APEC. So, and Russia again is an outlier on multilateral trade negotiations and arrangements. So for India, this is a new opportunity to re-enter this economic architecture, economic ecosystem, and it should make good use of it, even if that involves some bold reforms in the domestic economic sector.
All right, great. My last question to you. India has always maintained a very deft balance when it comes to its relations, and it has not really succumbed to pressure from the US, especially the Ukraine-Russia war. Do you think that will have any kind of impact on this IPEF arrangement?
No, first of all, I think, um, well, India is a democracy, and we are argumentative Indians,
Yes.
starting from the head of government and head of state to the common people like you and I. And so is America. I mean, whatever Biden says in public is also to ignite a debate. So there's this David Easton's model of input and output and processing, right? This is how democracies work. This catharsis is important. This is necessary. And this is necessary not just between the India and the US, but any relationship. I mean, you can go down to personal relationships. This kind of trying to understand each other by arguments and counter arguments is very healthy practice. Countries that don't do it end up becoming rivals, end up becoming uh, uh, suspicious of each other. So security dilemma is a problem that emanates essentially because of lack of dialogue. There are so many problems between India and China, and they're mostly because India and China don't talk to each other, and they don't have trust in each other because they don't talk to each other, and they don't understand each other because there are not enough mechanisms, right? How do you get out of that? You can criticize each other's policies off and on, or whenever it is essential. You can take a closer look at each other's security, economic, foreign policy priorities, question that. You'll get a response like Mr. Jaishankar is giving the response, I think, across the world. He's been conveying India's position and the message, which was very good.
Yes.
And no matter how it is projected in the media, especially in the Indian media, you can absolutely count New York Times and Washington Post. But the feedback that is being given, the original idea behind it is that India has been able to convey its message. This, we could not have done it through all our press releases by the Ministry of External Affairs, things that are being done through these think tank dialogues and media appearances and talk shows. So I think this is very good. This is, in the long run, this is going to build greater trust between India and the US. I'm very hopeful of that.
Great. So this appears to be a Quad Plus initiative, some apprehensions, but mostly enthusiasm for IPEF. Dr. Mishra, thank you very much for taking out the time for joining us and giving us your perspective and clearing the air about a lot of important matters. Thank you very much once again for joining us.
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. So that was this evening's gist. I hope all of you enjoyed the show. I hope all of you learned a lot about what this framework is all about and what kind of repercussions we might be seeing in the next few years. So thank you very much for watching. We welcome your comments, your feedback. Once again, please get on our social media handles, like, subscribe, share, download the video, share it with your friends who are interested in the topic. And we look forward to having more and more subscribers, more and more comments from all of you. And thank you very much once again for watching. Goodbye.